nice way to start day number 2. Wednesday morning, 36 degrees. We didn't freeze like we did last night, but it rained. Off and on almost all night long. Beautiful day in the mountains. And this is the way we start our morning. It's gonna be an adventurous day for sure. Hang on, let's have fun. He wants to walk by, we'll let him. That's what I say. Wow. Greetings, adventurers. DJ Wayne, DJ Faith here in Cherokee, North Carolina, getting ready to explore the Oconaluftee Indian Village, high atop a mountain in Cherokee. So excited. Started our morning off with a big, ginormous elk. We called him Big Daddy. Right up in our face, thought he was gonna get in the truck with us. But let's go experience the authentic replica of a Cherokee town in 1750. Buckle up, let's go. All right, so it is a tour with a tour guide. That's really cool. Beautiful day.
Don't touch any of the crafts, boys.
56 degrees out. And they got restrooms. That's very important.
Yeah, I'm hearing her okay.
I talk loud enough, huh? All right, guys, so this is going to be our first station, and this is known as finger weaving. So here I'll be able to explain to you guys the different methods that we'd use to make belt sashes and garters, where this will be the oldest and first traditional method that you guys would actually see us using. This is known as what we would call the oblique weave. So we're weaving glass beads into this piece to be able to create the designs, where before anything like these glass beads were introduced to us by trade with the Europeans, we were using different things like seashells that we could weave in here to make the designs. Now this isn't made out of anything like commercial wool yarn that you'd see our people using today. What we're actually making this piece out of is strands of mountain bison fur. You'd see that we had mountain bison roaming up here in the area up until about the late 1790s, where the last one was killed off in the Asheville Biltmore Forest area due to the fur trade. So if we didn't have any of this nice soft material that we could work with, we can also use different bits of plant fibers that we could gather. Things like mulberry root bark, dog's bane, milkweed, bull nettle, whatever we needed to be able to create what's called the Indian hemp plant and weave our pieces as well. Now you'd see that especially after we got a hold of those commercial wool yarns, we can use something like a single webbing method. This is just going to be a simple over and under that's giving you these checked and plaid designs that I'm holding here in my hands, as well as up here behind me on display on the bar. Now whenever people like Miss Leslie are weaving with these pieces, she can use as little as 10 strands to as many as 250, which is what I'm holding in my hands here today. Now, we'd make multiple of these larger squares and sew them to one another, so you'd end up with something like a blanket or a shawl in about 1 to 2 months. Now, these individual belts and these squares, you'd finish with those in just about a week to 2 weeks, depending on how long you were working on them. Now, if we wanted to make something like the double woven belts that we've got over there to the side, that'll be the last method that we have, and it's the most intricate that I'll be talking about, where we're weaving and twisting and turning those different colored strands of yarn. We'd be able to get the different ones on display, like things like the lightning bolt, the dancing eagle, and then the double diamond that we have over there on the very end. But do we have any questions before we head on? Then whenever you folks are ready, we can head on down to the next stop, and this will be our beadwork station. So this is Miss Agnes that we've got here frozen to death this morning. And so you see that whenever she'd be working on things, she'd actually be able to use a couple different methods. We have something like the scroll work that she can make, where she'd sew it onto the sides of men's trousers or along the hemlines of ladies' skirts and dresses for decoration. Now this is only going to take you a few days, maybe a week at the longest, just depending on how many beads you wanted to sew onto the piece, or the different things like the belts, sashes, and the garters that you would see our people wearing. We'd be able to make these out of solid work as well. We'd be able to sew each individual bead directly into the next one, so that way they're all sewn through twice. So if any of these beads were to break and be lost, it's only a few of them that can be easily mended. Now this just takes you about a week or 2 weeks to be able to finish, same as the belts that we saw done over at the last station. But then once you got done with this, you'll actually sew in a couple pieces of buckskin. This will serve as the ties for our belts. Now, the earlier form of solid work that you could also see us using, this is going to be known as heddle stitch. So this is just sewn into the individual strands of yarn. We can see that pattern really nice up here on the front side, but whenever we flip it over, you guys will be able to see those nice strands of yarn, that grid pattern that we have over there on the back. Now, all these glass beads, these were going to be introduced through European trade that we have. And now, beforehand, we were using different natural materials that we had gathered ourselves. So things like bones, teeth, and claws from wild animals were going to be used. The little Indian corn beads, also known as the Job's tear, that we could gather in our gardens. Or things like clay beads, copper combs that we could make as well from the little deposits that we would have up here in the area that we'd gather in the higher elevations, especially whenever it oxidized underneath the snow, turning a nice bright green color. But do we have any questions before we head on? All right, guys, and whenever we're ready, we can head uphill and we can go to our next station. This will be pottery. Kiln isn't traditionally used by our people. So we're going to do this entire process completely by hand. We'll start by digging out a specific sediment of clay known as yellow clay, which we're going to find down there above the riverbeds, about this far above our wrist, that we'll have to dig down. Now, whenever we're using that, we'll use that moist yellow clay that we're going to be finding there, because the different sediments, it really increases that sort of moisture since it's found there next to the river. We don't want to necessarily use the red clay that we find over here on the sides of the mountain banks, where this is a little bit more brittle. It works like concrete that we're using to build our homes, that I'll show you later on in the tour. So what we're going to do to just make these smaller, more decorative pieces up here in the front is just pinch in this nice ball of clay with our thumb and our forefingers, and then once we got done, it'll turn out like something like this pretty little piece that we'll have right here. Now, these can be used for storage, for decorative pieces, or even if you just wanted to make something like a larger scale cooking vessel, you could also make these out of the pieces of pottery that we would have. Now, we wouldn't make something as small as this for like a cooking bowl that you'd see us using. What we'll have to use is a completely different method of pottery, which is known as the coil method that we're taking. So the same ball of clay, you roll it out sort of like the coils of a snake, and then stack that on top of a flat disc of clay. This will serve as your bottom, where you'd want to smooth out the inside and the outside, so that way you wouldn't see these little bumps and ridges once you got done with it. This is a much smaller version of what this pottery would look like. Since these were made on a much larger scale, they would typically be about the size of the trash can that we have over here next to me. But since clay is going to be naturally porous, if I quit dropping things, you guys can see that we're going to take something like this sort of dried out corn cob here today. We needed a nice fresh one, so it's full of all the corn oils that are going to be inside of here. We'll place it in the mouth of the pot, face the mouth of the pot towards the flame while we're firing it, and it's going to heat up all those natural oils that would be on the inside of this corn cob, coating the pot with it so it's waterproof, sort of like seasoning your cast iron skillet. Now, we could take something like this dried corn cob that I've been waving around, and you could press that on there sort of like the outside of a stamp. But you could also use the divots of a seashell that we had gotten through trade, or even little bits of a sharpened wooden stick or something fancy like a deer antler that we could use. Now, whenever we got a hold of especially the different colors that we were going to be using, traditionally we still don't even have these colors on our different pieces of pottery. It's really going to be the sediments of clay, but also how we're doing it during the burning process. So that darker tone pot that we can see there in the center of the table, it's actually burned with a softer wood because it produces a lot more smoke than it does flame. To get a nice light tone like we'll see up here in the front, this will actually be a harder wood because it produces a lot more flame than it does smoke. But then to get a nice combination between the two colors, you'd end up with something like this pretty little mottled vase that we have right here. This piece in particular is actually over 40 years old and is still in really good condition. But do we have any questions, folks, before we head on here? Then whenever we are ready, you guys are more than welcome to head back behind you, and that'll be our wood carving station that we'll have. Sides of the mountains. Since we especially lived in places like Tennessee and Kentucky back in the day, that was a part of our territory. Kentucky especially is very well known for their flint deposits. They have about 52 in that state alone. So we'd be able to gather anything that we needed to make it into the arrowheads that we could make, or even fashion it into something like a drill bit that we would be using, something like these hoe heads that we'd use to till our gardens, or even something as sharp as a knife blade that we'd be able to make. Now, these are all going to be before metal tools that we would see here. So even if you're going to be carving something as intricate as stone, you guys could do this if you just wanted to add some little holes like the part stems that we would have around here in the area as well. Now, if we wanted to add something like the eye holes of the mast, you guys could do that too with something known as the bow drill that we're using. Now, this is actually going to be a little bit of a bigger version that we would have. You wouldn't necessarily see this piece of wood that we see stacked on top of here. This would actually be a piece of stone, just so you could add a lot more weight to your drill. And then if you were working with something like those eyes of the needles that we would have to make out of bone, you'd see that we're going to use a smaller little one that was going to be our fingers that we could use. It's like a little finger drill that we would have. Now this is what it would look like. Now we weren't necessarily able to work with these harder pieces of wood that we have over here on the far end of the bar. Really, we're going to see these after metal tools are introduced to us. We were not only able to get a lot more detail into the outsides of these masks, but able to hollow them out a lot more onto the inside as well, getting that nice, clean, smooth finish. And before then, we're making our masks out of things like hickory bark that we have up here in the area that we could gather. Things like these gourds. We got these through trade with Southern American tribes about 14,000 years ago. Or even something like a hornet's nest that we could make into a mask as well. You'd see that we didn't waste anything back in the day. So even if we had some hornet's larvae that were going to be left over in this mask, we would actually clean those out and we would make it into a soup, a hornet's larva soup that we would eat. That's actually a delicacy amongst our people. Really, the only ones that know how to make it anymore is going to be people like our elders, my great-grandparents' generation. But do we have any questions before we head on, folks?
What did you say the little point was, too?
So that's just an arrowhead that we're going to be making. And so this is something that you guys can use, not just for those tools like our arrows that we're going to be making, but also something like a drill if you wanted to make it. It doesn't necessarily have to be all fancy and shiny, you know, it's just going to do the job. Yeah, do we have any other questions, folks? Then whenever you guys are ready, we can slide on down the hill and go to our basket weaving station there behind you. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. And she's not just a basket weaver, she can't just make these pieces. She can usually do it from start to finish, busting down her own trees that we'll have up here in the area, making sure that she can dye her own splints, and then also doing things like the meticulous bit of sharpening your knives every single time that you need to shave down these materials as well. So what we're going to be using to make our baskets traditionally is going to be things like this hickory bark that we used up here. This basket's been here since 1952 whenever we first opened. People like my great-grandmother have held it, my dad's held it whenever he worked here, and my little brother's held it whenever he started a couple of years ago. It's been here for all of us. So it's still in pretty good condition. If you want to be able to make anything like these pieces, usually all these crafts that we have made up here in the village, they will outlive the crafter that makes them. So we can also use things like the river cane that we have up here. This is a smaller, stockier cousin to the bamboo that we'd see here growing on the areas instead, but that was going to be introduced around the 60s and the 70s. It is going to be an invasive species that we have nowadays. This takes about 12 or 13 years for it to fully mature, where bamboo, I would say it only takes about 6 or 7. So we're going to split this straight down the center, keeping this nice green side that we'll have on the outside because it actually makes it waterproof, this material does. So we'll split it, making sure it's the same even width and thickness all the way through. And then once we get done, this is the little basket split that we would end up with. Paper thin, paper thin. And you got to be really careful whenever you're running your fingers across it because you can get some pretty gnarly paper cuts whenever you're using something like this river cane. Now, if you wanted to work with something especially like white oak, hickory, and maple, we'd be able to bust it up at a sapling no bigger than this post over here at the corner, and then again into the staves that we'll have like this one. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to wedge my knife in between here, pull these strips apart, and then shave it down to, again, the same even width and thickness all the way through. Where this is a little basket split that we'd end up with right here. Now we see how this one's going to be a little bit of a tinted color. This isn't going to be its natural tone. This is something that we get not through artificial dyes, but through the natural colors that we have up here in our area that, unlike those artificial dyes that we use now, they won't fade over time. We can get them all with these different little colors that we'll have in here in this basket. And you can see that this is what they're actually going to look like whenever they're on the outside of the material. So we have some very beautiful tones on the outside of here, some browns, some reds, some oranges that we'll have up here as well, some yellows. And so this will all be done with things like the bloodroot that we'll have up here. This is going to be how you get those reds and those oranges. But if you wanted a little bit more of the lighter tones, use its cousin, yellow root. This is how you get your vibrant yellow tones. Now, if you wanted something a little bit more natural looking, we do have things like a walnut. This is how you get your light browns and your dark browns. And then the butternut that we have over here, this is how you get those darker black tones. But do we have any questions, folks? Then whenever we're ready, we can head around that corner and across that bridge down there to our weapons station that we have.
Ooh, weapons.
us today. And so you'd see that he's going to be doing the process of making our arrowheads. Now he's on to the end bits of the faces. This is what we'll call pressure flaking. But to get to that point, he needs to do a process that's called flint knapping, where he'll take that general shape of the rock that he wants to make into his arrowhead, take another rock, and then knock off the edges to be able to make something like the shape of that. Now he takes that nail that he has sitting there on the side of his lap, or more traditionally something like a deer antler, and then he'd be able to flake off those edges and press them onto the side to be able to add things like the serrated edges that you'd see on the sides of our knife blades, or even things like the arrowheads as well. Now whenever we're making them, we have a couple different types. This is going to be the round shoulder arrowhead that we're using. So this is made out of different things like the flint and the quartz that you guys would see us gathering up here in the area, where we're using this for hunting purposes more particularly. We're wanting to tie it onto the shaft of the arrow using things like the fibers that we'll find. So mulberry root bark, dog's bane, milkweed, bullnut. Just had a little bit of a brain fart there, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And then also using things like the shaft of this, it'll be mountain cane, so a smaller, stockier cousin to the river cane that we have growing up here in this area. But if you want to make the fletching, this is just one turkey feather cut in half and then tied onto the end with some sinew. We have some little notches that are put into the side right here, so that way we can have it spin and create a sort of spinning effect whenever we have that fired. Now traditionally, that's going to be used for hunting purposes, because we actually did think that it was very cowardly to fight someone from a long distance. We only did that if absolutely necessary. We're going to be making the arrowheads into this specific shape that we have right over here, known as the broad shoulder, or some folks as the square shoulder. So what we're making it out of is this obsidian that we have right here. This is a nice volcanic glass that we had to get through trading with people like the Southern American tribes, like the Mayans and the Aztecs way back 14,000 years ago. So it wasn't a problem grabbing something like this. But since it is really brittle, once it makes contact with something hard like bone, it is going to shatter, and that's going to cause a really nasty infection. We're attaching this one onto the shaft of the arrow using things like the animal sinew, so dried animal tendons that's made into a really durable cordage, but once it makes contact with something like liquid, it is going to swell and unravel. So the only way that you can remove it is to push it all the way through or to cut it out with a knife. But that's not what our people like to use. We preferred hand-to-hand combat. This is what my parents like to call the attitude adjuster, otherwise known as the Cherokee War Club that we have up here. And so we do sell these in the gift shop, parents, if you guys need some, or ladies if you need one for your husband. So we're actually making it to the forearm of the user, so it's personalized to you. This one's made out of a rhododendron root ball. This is what we'd see before Europeans. Afterwards, we can make it into something like a solid piece of hickory that we've got right here. Now, the first weapon that your kids are going to learn to master, this is going to be the blowgun that we have over here to the side. So this is made out of a piece of river cane that we do see is a little bit crooked whenever it first grows, so we'll have to straighten it out just a little bit. We'll take it over a fire, lay a piece of leather over our knee, roll it out till it becomes nice and straight. And then to get the darts for this blowgun, we'll take a couple buds of the Scottish thistle that we can see hanging over here. This is also known as purple thistle. Whenever it first blooms, it turns a really bright purple color, so we'll take about 2 or 3 buds of it, wrap it around the end of this little yellow locust stick that we would have right here, and then you would have your blowgun dart. So the largest game that you could get with this is something like a wild turkey, and that's only if it was a headshot, just because we'd see that these darts are a little bit blunt. I was gonna say, here, I got a better one. There we go. Now, I was gonna say, Bush is gonna try to over here to shoot this piece of cardboard that we've got to the side, so if you guys want to scoot down so you can see it a little bit better, you guys are more than welcome to. And that's just about the teenage size. The longest one I've seen has been about 14 feet long. Ooh. Let's give him a hand. Let's give him a hand.
Yeah, good job.
See, that's why we got food line around here nowadays. Now, whenever you guys are ready, we are more than welcome to take a look in the inside of this house that we've got down over here to the side. Or if you guys have any questions, more than happy to answer. Thank you, Bush.
We'd love to have one of those. That's okay. No, and then we want to ask you what stick you're using.
This will be the 1800s home. So this was built during like the times of the French and Indian War, War of 1812. This is going to be the time period that you guys would see us living in. And this is just a 1/3 scale replica, folks. So probably from about this far corner to that fence post that we just passed a little bit ago, that'd be the traditional length of this home. So think about those long houses that people would live in. About 10 to 15.
One family?
Yep, one family, multi-generation.
Yeah.
No window.
Yes, you can bring it back. Yes, of course.
Sorry. No, you're fine.
Especially we're actually trying to offer
So 10 to 15 people, one family, multi-generational, would live in a nice long house just like this.
go and hide up in the woods for days or weeks at a time. So that way, whenever those raiders came through, they were more likely to think that it was an abandoned European village instead of a Native American one that we were currently living in. So this only takes a week to 2 weeks with your entire family working together to be able to build. And that's not this small scale replica. That's the traditional size of this home. Because you're going to have about 10 to 15 people living in here all at one time. If you're going to be having people like your like I've got my brother, so I would have him until he got married with his wife, and then I'd have my mother up until she passed away. My dad would be living with us. All of his sisters would be living with us as well. You'd see that my grandmothers, both of them would be staying with us, and then my great-grandmother as well. They would all be staying in here in this home with us. So if you guys have that many people living in here all at this one time, you're going to have that many people helping you build this house all at one time as well. But if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. But if you guys want to take a look on the inside of these two houses that we have down here, this will probably be the last stop before we go down here and take a look at these dances that we'll have at 12.
Nice. So the loft in there kept their storage, and if they got word that a raid was coming, they hid the storage in the woods. Harder to find. That was a house of 1812, 1/3 scale replica. And what is this one?
A sweat house. So like
Sweat
a winter
house.
home that we would stay in. So we had been interacting with her in the 1690s to like early 1700s. So we had seen different things like that. And you can see that we had we can have it certain. So it would be like we had a piece town that's going to be down there towards the French area.
Come in and let the sunlight get, there we go. Natural sunlight.
And it had over 10,000 people that were not just Cherokee people, but also traders, people that were in exile from other villages because no crime was allowed within those walls. So you see that lots of people were able to go there, trade with those folks as well. And you see that even if you were something like a really well-established trader who knew you and knew the community, you could come inside the village and you could trade with you. And so this is what you go a little bit nicer than over here on the top of the hill. We have the logs sawed off on the sides and then dovetail carved fashion on the corners, just so it settles a little bit more when that red clay and animal hair dries in between it. Now, whenever we're having something like this house, it's going to be over here to the side. This is what we live in during the winter time. So these are going to be our fall houses that we would have. Those crafting venues that you guys saw a little bit ago, those were our summer homes that we would stay in. So we're the inventors of vacation homes back in the day. Now we're going to be staying in something like this using those large river stones as the heating system. So heat them up by fire real good, roll them back in there, and then you'd actually dump some water over top of it so you could breathe in that vapor that it created. You can see all these herbs that we have growing on the top of here as well. these were going to be traditional medicines that we use. So this was not only like a winter home, but also a hospital that every single Cherokee family had. And then somebody known as the medicine man, he would have one that's in the center of the village that worked as like a larger general hospital. We had over 600 different recipes for our medicines, over 3,000 different types of plants that you guys would see us using to create those recipes. We had lifespans that reach way up into the upper 70s, lower 80s, with our clean diet that we had back in the day. But do we have any questions before we head on? All right, folks. Then whenever we're ready, you guys can follow me.
We'll come back to you in a minute.
All right, how's everybody doing today? Okay. Good to hear. My name's Levi. I'm going to be the singer for the bees this afternoon. So, now before we start some rules, please do not touch this mountain of sand that you see before you. This separates common ground from sacred ground. So do not touch it, stomp it, kick it, or even play with it. And before we get started, we're going to do something called roll call. I'm going to go to each one of these arbors. I'm going to point to your arbor. I want you to yell, yo, not as proud as you can. So, from right here, from you, all the way down to right here. You guys are all going to be part of blue. So whenever I say Anisha-Honey, I want you to yell, yo. Don't scream, just yell, yo. Loud as proud as you can. Anisha-Honey! Yo! All right, good. Now from here, all the way down to right here. One she's right here.
You're gonna be long hair.
Okay, from this one here, all the way down to right here. You are all pale. Whenever I say I need one D, I want you to yell no. I need one D! No! Alright, same head right now. From right here, all the way down to right here. You are all birds. Alright, now say I need your squaw, I want you to yell yo. I need your squaw! Yeah! Alright, thanks for having right now then. Alright, from right here, from this post right here, this post all the way down here. Alright, from this post to this post, you're all locked tail. I think it's going! Yeah! Alright, not bad, not bad. Things still have it. From this post right here, right here where Marcus is. You guys are all deer. Whenever I see an Ikoe, you yell yo. An Ikoe! Yo! Alright, I think deer has that one. Alright, so from right here, on the other side of Marcus, all the way to, let's say, you. Yeah. Let's say, right here on this side of Gagama, all the way down to the other side of Marcus. You guys are all wolf. Whenever I yell Aniwaya, you guys yell yo. Aniwaya! Yeah! Wolf has it. All right, from Gagama. All the way.
We're a long-haired clan.
Right here, all the way down to Gagama. You guys are all long hair. When I say Anigilohi, I want you to yell yo. Anigilohi! Yeah! Long hair takes.
Yeah.